All right, guys, let's talk brushes. Thea here from That Sweet Tea Life, and we're talking over on the blog about synthetic brushes and how to care for them and what makes them great. So I wanted to put a quick video together for you in time-lapse form showing you what all of this self-cleaning mumbo jumbo is about, how to use it, and why to use it. So let's get started. Now here you can see I'm using a really popular self-cleaning method for this brush. I wanted to debunk a little bit of a myth that's out there and kind of explain in detail why and when we should really use this. Now, if we're honest, I'm pretty sure there's not any artists out there that simply have jars and pails all around their shop or setup with just water and brushes being suspended all around. But there is huge perks to utilizing this method, and it makes sense whenever you use it properly. Now, first off, let's talk about the why. Why we do this is because of, well, how much we spend on them, as well as what they're made of. Each of these brushes carry a lot of bristles, or filaments as we call them. Now at the very end are very, very fine fibers. So each of those bristles or filaments are tapered at the very end, making them super, super tiny compared to the rest of that bristle. The reason they do this is because that's going to give us that flawless finish that we're looking for. Instead of the bristle dragging and kind of gouging the paint as we go, it lays the paint and allows it to rest on the surface undisturbed. So we don't want to damage the bristles whatsoever. We want to keep them in tip-top shape. So what are some things that could cause damage to these really fine bristles? One of the things that causes damage is resting your brush inside of a container like a jar or a pail so that the bristles are resting on the bottom of it, being bent this way or that as it sits inside some sort of liquid or not. Over time, doing this causes them to bend, distort, and overall just be damaged, especially as we continue to clean them, work them, trying to get them back in shape. We prevent any of that from happening by using the self-cleaning method. Another thing that causes damage to these really fine bristles is simply cleaning, whether it's general cleaning where we're scrubbing and scrubbing away at the brushes trying to get all of the paint and residue out of there, or it's cleaning after they have been sitting for a weekend or a week or a month with paint on them because we forgot to do anything with them. Just the cleaning process alone can damage the bristles and distort them, whether it's bending them, breaking them, pulling them out of the shaft. This, of course, isn't good for the brush, and we want to prevent that from happening too. So, how exactly do we prevent the damage from happening in the first place? Well, one thing I want to kind of debunk is this myth that we have to have jars and pails all over our work area with water and brushes haphazardly or somehow concocted to be suspended in the water at all times. While this method, the self-cleaning method, is super useful, it's not necessary for it to be suspended at all times. Contrary to some beliefs, they are allowed to dry out. Now this is all going to depend on your workload. Do you paint every single day? Do you paint only on the weekends or every other week? This is going to vary according to your work habits. Now, if you genuinely and literally use that brush every single day, then hey, go ahead. Keep it suspended in water. It's not going to do any damage. And if you're constantly using it, then it just makes sense. Otherwise, this is what I do. So if you want a strategy to follow, here is mine. Perhaps it will help you as well. When I begin a project, I use a wet brush. I use a wet brush on 99% of my work. So this just makes sense to me. I make sure that not only is my brush just sprayed with water, I actually saturate it, and then I work out all of the excess water. What this does, it allows the paint or the product to load into the brush a little bit better instead of wanting to just rest at the very tip or on the outside of the brush. So once I begin this process, that brush will stay wet until that project is done. Say, for instance, I'm working on a white piece of furniture, as the brush shows here. I pick up the brush, I wet the brush, I get rid of the excess moisture, and I begin painting. Now, when I'm done with that session, whether it's just this session and I'm going to come back to it 45 minutes later, this evening, or the next day, I go ahead and very gently just rinse out any of the excess paint that's on the brush. After that, I place it suspended in water in a container. Now, shown here, you can see I've used a clip that holds onto the handle and holds it up in the air or in the water rather than allowing it to rest on the bottom. Another method that I use typically actually is I have metal pails, and those metal pails are lined with magnets. So because the brushes have a metal ferrule, they simply stick to the sides by the magnet and are then suspended up into the water, therefore not resting on the bottom. And now when I'm ready to paint again, using the same brush for the same project, I simply remove the brush from the container. I go ahead and rinse out the jar or pail to get any of the water or residue out of it and refill it with fresh water. That way it's ready for me when I need to wrap up again. Then I take the brush and I very, very gently simply rinse it out in case there's any remaining residue in there, and then I begin painting. I know for sure that there is no crumbly, dried up pieces of product inside of my brush, and therefore it's not going to be a problem. There's not going to be a buildup, and this is going to help the life of my brush. Now, an extra little tidbit that can help your brush last even longer is, at this point, whenever I'm completely finished with a project and it's done and it's time to put the brushes away because I'm not going to be painting for maybe a week or a month or 2 or 10. If I don't have anything planned for the next day, I will go ahead and wash the brush gently with, you can use dish soap, you can use Scrubby, which is a wonderful product. There's lots of different cleaning products, but really just a mild soap and water is just fine. Gently clean the brush. Then after you have rinsed all of the soap out of the brush, you can actually take the brush and work some fabric softener into it. I keep a container on hand at all times. That way I just have something to go to whenever it comes time for this process. This only works if your bristles are wet, so never do this if you do not have completely moistened bristles. But I work the fabric softener, whether it's Downy, Suavitel, Snuggle, whatever you want to use. Work it into the bristles really well, allowing the fabric softener to do its thing. Then rinse it away really well. You don't want the fabric softener to stay in the bristles. They may not play well with the paint whenever you go to use your paint later on. So go ahead and rinse it out really, really well, and then lay it flat or hang it up to dry. This is where the myth debunking kind of comes in. Some will tell you, or some believe, that you have to keep it wet at all times, no matter what. It's really not necessary. In between projects, whenever you know you're not coming back to it, or heck, even if I just don't have anything planned for tomorrow, I can go ahead and lay it flat or hang it up so it can dry. Will it definitely be dry by the time I go to use it again? Perhaps not. Who knows? We're creatives. But the point is that we're not setting it inside of a container and allowing the bristles to touch the bottom and therefore get bent and distorted. We want to prevent that from happening. So you lay it flat, allow it to dry, or you can set up something to where they're able to hang, therefore suspended in the air and unable to distort the bristles. Now, why did we incorporate fabric softener? Of course, this is something that you don't have to do. Again, I'm just giving you my methods so that maybe it can help you too. Sometimes whenever we have a system that we see somebody else use, we can adopt it and kind of grow on it. Fabric softener is going to do the same thing for the bristles that it does for our clothing. It helps our clothing to keep its shape, to stay soft, to not wrinkle. It also allows them to be a little bit more sealed off and protected from any sort of stains or things that want to stick to them. It does the same thing for your brush. It's going to allow the paint pigments and particles to fall away a little bit easier. It's going to allow them to keep their shape a little bit better. It's just an added little bonus that you can do to help retain the life of your brush. So as you can see, our brush is pretty well taken care of. All of the heavier particles of the paint have fallen to the bottom. Some still exist up in the water just because those are the lighter parts of the paint. So again, this is why you want to still rinse it very gently before you go to use it. I can use this and pick it up and feel safe and secure that I don't have a bunch of crumbly, dried, cracked mess on my hands that's going to build up over time. Alright guys, that's about it. So I hope you head over to the blog, That Sweet Tea Life, www.thatsweettealife.com, where I share with you tips, tricks, and tutorials regarding crafts, DIYs, and largely painted furniture. If you ever have any questions, please feel free to let me know. I'm happy to answer them, whether it's on the blog, Facebook, or otherwise. I'm here to help you DIY the life you love.